All right. Okay. Welcome back to week 6 of web design decal. Hopefully midterm season's treating y'all okay. Spring break's in 2 weeks, so stay strong, guys. Yeah, so today or this week, we're going to be talking about responsiveness in web design. And just as a like, I guess a forewarning, none of this content is like or ever used in the scope of this class because responsiveness in web design is a pain in the ass. Like it will take you forever to do because there's just so many different screens out there to design for. So this is just good knowledge in case like you actually are working on a personal website outside of this class and you actually need to make it like responsive on like mobile or like other different kinds of like laptop, desktop sizes. It's going to be very useful for that. Yeah. So yeah, so for the sake of like midterm project and like, I don't know, final project, we won't really care about responsiveness. As long as it works for your screen size, it'll be fine. So a couple announcements before we get started. So as you've noticed, Portal has been going down. I mean, it's not that bad anymore this past day or two, but over the weekend it was really bad. But I'm still trying to debug things. I made it so that like it only goes down every like 6 hours now, which is way better than like every hour compared to like Saturday. But hopefully it should be good by like tomorrow or Thursday. Because last semester it happened too, and it just fixed itself for some reason. I don't know why, but I'm not complaining. So yeah, hopefully it'll be back to normal soon, so you guys can just focus on your work. But besides that, this week we won't have any new homework or lab assignments just because next week, Tuesday, is when the midterm project is due. So next week, we want you to really focus on the project so that you guys can put like your 100% because we really want to see your guys' amazing designs come to life. So again, no homework or lab assignments this week. But yeah, speaking of midterm project, again, it's due next Tuesday, the 16th at midnight PST. So please submit that on time and make sure when you submit both a zip on Portal and you submit on our form here at wd.io/go/project-submit because if you don't submit one of the two, you're going to lose points, mainly because the form is where you attach your write-up, things like that. And then as usual, we have office hours and our feedback form if you need. Cool. So let's just get into responsive design. So as I'm sure you know this, but we have so many things that can access the internet today. A fun fact is that nearly 4.4 billion people have access to the internet, which is more than half of the global population. And these are accessible from all kinds of different devices, from laptops and desktops to tablets to smartphones to your PS5. I don't know. And even freaking fridges and microwaves can do it now. It's pretty insane. So there's a lot of different screens sizes out there that exist that can access the internet together. So we are definitely in the post-PC era. And a fun fact is that I think in 2018, 48.2% of the internet usage was from mobile, which is basically half of the internet use. It's pretty insane. So yeah. And yes, that is sad news. 3.3 billion don't have access, but I'm sure that number has gone up since then. This was like 2 years ago since we updated the number, but there are those people who don't have access, of course. But hopefully that changes soon with like Facebook doing their like satellite internet thing or whatever. Yeah. So this is an article by Vox done in 2017 showing how Apple, when they released the iPhone, like their continual impact on like internet usage on a phone. So you can see this graph here, like over time, we have like average daily minutes consumption per like different facet. And you can see mobile internet has been increasing like pretty fast ever since 2010 when the iPhone was it 2010? I don't know, whenever like iPhone was released and could access the internet. So it has a huge impact on us. So you might have noticed in your midterm project that like when you adjust your browser size or like you open it on your monitor instead of your laptop, things like that, that has a different screen size, it just looks so whack. Like things are way out of place from where you did it before. And this is because we are not designing for responsiveness. So in this example here, we have like a 1280 pixel screen, and then we have like 3 cat boxes, 300 by 300 pixels. Because we're using the pixels unit, it's going to stay like pixels is the same unit of measurement across all screen sizes. So it's going to have the same size, whether it's on your laptop or your phone. So if we look at it on our phone, we only can see one of the cat boxes because our screen is 300 pixels wide, and it just so happens that it can only fit one cat box on our screen, and the other 2 cats are not happy because of that. Again, pixels are the same units across all screen sizes, and this is why responsive design is very, very important, but also very difficult to do. So I'm going to go through inspector demo, like a inspect element demo, to see how your site looks like on mobile anyways, which is pretty cool because this is built into all browsers. So I'm on Chrome right now. So I don't know, let's go to our favorite website, stripe.com. It looks different. It looks way better than when we showed it to you last time. But if you open inspect element on Google Chrome, let me zoom in. So if I zoom in on the inspect element here, you see we have our regular selector tool to like select certain elements on the page. But right next to it, you see this phone and a tablet icon. And if you click on that, that will toggle mobile view for that specific website. So currently I am on iPhone 10, and you can see this drop-down menu. It has a ton of different options that you can choose from that are built in, like iPhone 5. This is what's going to look like on an iPhone 5. You can clearly see that's different now because this is their Stripe's mobile view site. I could do like a Moto G4. I could do an iPad if I want. They have tablets too. You could do your custom responsive, like custom stuff here. But yeah, this is really useful for when you're designing for your website and you want to see what it looks like without having to publish it and then access your URL from your phone and then check from there. This already does it for you, which is really insanely useful. Yeah, so that's basically how you use inspector or mobile view inspector. And this cool button here, like this shaky phone icon, it just means rotate. And this, now I'm on a landscape mode for my phone. So yeah, it's very useful to see. And you can also see like the pixel dimensions here that are like preset. For iPhone, it's like 375 by 812. Yeah, so it's a really good resource for you to use when you're designing your websites. There's also this page, Google Mobile Friendly Test. You can just like search whether your website is mobile friendly or not, and it'll tell you what you need to do. Like let's try wd.io. And then it'll analyze whether your website or that website is mobile friendly. I didn't realize it would take this long, but I hope our website's mobile friendly. I think it is. Yep, our page is mobile friendly. We good. Yeah. Cool. So why doesn't my site, like why the stuff you're doing right now, why doesn't it now work on all devices? And this is simply just because every device is a different screen size, of course, and it has different rendering engines depending on what browsers you're using, what apps you're using, things like that. So if you can imagine, content design for a laptop is much bigger than content for like a mobile or a tablet view, because a phone is like small, but it's also vertical, right? But our laptop is wide and bigger. So structure is very different from mobile to web view. It's like very interesting. So what does this mean for designers like us or aspiring designers? It just means that we have to make sure that all our websites work on all devices and browsers. This is for accessibility, people who need these kinds of like different accessibility reasons, but also having good user experience in general. I don't want to see a site that's like designed for web and only web for like a laptop, because then it's going to look so funky on my phone. So for responsive web design, we have a quote that we really like to emphasize every semester: designing websites for multiple screen sizes and devices so that there is an optimal experience for every user at every possible size. Because like I mentioned in the beginning, there are so many different screens out there that you have to keep in mind. It's crazy. Like even you have to design for fridges and microwaves now. So I mean, back in the day when it was just computers, it was very simple, but now it's more complex. So today we'll be talking about 3 different components of responsive design, which include browser compatibility, screen resolutions, and mobile compatibility. And these are all really important that play into responsiveness today. So the first of which is browser compatibility. So there's so many browsers that exist out there, but each browser has like one purpose, and it's just to render like any web page on this like browser. It's like something to help you see a website. But like because we have different browsers, each browser has its own take on a rendering engine. So I'll show you what that difference looks like with different like CSS styles in a couple slides, I think. But basically, every rendering engine allows a browser to display HTML, CSS, or JavaScript code onto the browser so that it shows front end like visual stuff instead of just code. So it's just like translates code into design stuff. So, oh yeah, this is what I was talking about. So here we see that since we have different browsers, this is their different takes on borders. So there's like Internet Explorer 7 and 8, they have like this kind of diamond shaped border, but Internet Explorer 10 has circles borders, and then Chrome 15 has square borders with like sharp corners. Firefox has its own kind of take. Firefox 4 and 6 are a little bit different from each other. Safari has its own take. Opera has its own take. So every browser has its own rendering engine. Like you can't really expect your website to look exactly the same on every single browser across because they have their own take on rendering stuff. But these are still minute differences. Like it's a border. You're probably not going to notice this, or you might not even just use dotted borders in general because you probably want to use something that's like consistent across all browsers. So you might have seen this like when Googling things or about like HTML, CSS, but there's something called vendor prefixes, which means that like one property of CSS can like take on different vendor prefixes. So for just the transition property, like you might have used that for like the hover effects, things like that, but we just use transition, that's it. But here we have like -WebKit, -Moz, -O. This means that we want it to be consistent across all different browsers. So because like each browser again has its own take, it might not look the same or do the same from Safari versus Chrome to like Firefox to Internet Explorer, these things. So WebKit is like the Safari version, Moz is Mozilla Firefox. I don't know what O is, but that's something else. And then of course we have the regular transition to just fall back on in case none of the browsers have this support. So vendor prefixes are a way to go when you want to have consistent like styles across all different browsers. However, like there are a lot of limitations that come with vendor prefixes, and it's not that commonly used anymore. Like they're mainly used for, again, like transitions, linear gradients, these kinds of stuff, but it's pretty annoying to like copy and paste WebKit -transition, Moz transition, O transition, like for every single thing, every selector out there. So what they really do now is that they're moving towards an @supports or a feature query, which I mean, I'm not going to go over it. It's a special syntax, but it kind of looks into like what if it's supported, we're going to do like these kinds of like optimizations to it so that it looks correct across all screens. So feel free to look up this @support feature queries on your own time, but it's not covered in this class. We'll be going over something different in the programming section. Another great resource that you can use is caniuse.com. And this, honestly, I use this a lot because it allows you to check what CSS or what HTML properties that are supported across all browsers. So you can see, can I use, like, and it has a search box, and it already has like most search features. We just learned Flexbox. Let's see what supports Flexbox, right? So here we see Internet Explorer. It's like, it's okay. It's like this olive green. So it's partial support, but on Edge, it's it's good, you know. And then Safari, same thing. We have the different versions, 6 to 8 is supported, 9 to 13, and then the latest one is also supported. Same thing for all these, Chrome for Android, Firefox for Android, like all these other browsers that I didn't even know existed. But you can check a lot of these different properties. I don't know, transform if it's supported, and it's basically supported across all browsers. This is a great way to check whether you need to do vendor prefixes, these kinds of add support features. So definitely use this website when you can. So the second issue we're going to talk about is screen resolutions, which I already covered a little bit. But if you want to know quickly what your screen resolution is right now, you can go to this website, whatismyscreenresolution.com, and it'll tell you. So right now, my monitor, I have like a 24-inch monitor. It's 1920 by 1080 pixels resolution, and it'll be different for like some PC versus Mac. It really depends. So it's really important to note that not all users will view your website on the same device that you have. Just because you have a 13-inch Mac doesn't mean that I have a 13-inch Mac. I mean, I do, but like someone might have a 15-inch Mac, or like someone might not even have a Mac at all. They have like a ThinkPad or a Microsoft Edge, or not Edge, Surface Pro, things like this, like, or even just like a desktop. So it's really important to note that the world is not centered around you. Your iPhone 10 is not the same as someone else's 12 or like their Android. So yeah. So changing the size of your browser window, again, also affects how your website looks, which is a really important thing to note too. So, so for screen resolutions, as of January 2018, this might have changed, but I don't think it'll be that like a big of a difference. The most commonly used browser resolution was 1366 by 768, which honestly, I've never seen that dimension before. Like, I feel like the most common I've seen is 1920 by 1080, which is what mostly are supported nowadays, or you see 1440 by 900. I honestly don't know what this first one is for, but it's also really important to note like what are most commonly used, so you can really gear your designs or your responsiveness towards like the most popular kinds of screen resolutions and work from there. So for lower screen resolutions, we're going to use CSS Media Queries, which Julia will go over during the programming section, and you'll know what CSS Media Queries mean. And lastly, we have mobile compatibility, which is honestly probably the most important out of all three, because we're always on our phone, and our phone is like such an important part of our daily lives that we just can't live without it. So user interfaces for mobile websites are very different than those for desktop. Like I mentioned before, your phone is like, it's vertical, it's longer on its height, but and it's pretty small too. But your laptop is longer on its width, but overall it's a huge screen. So you can imagine that the structure is already going to be different. When I have rows on a laptop, I might not be able to have rows on a phone, and I'll talk more in detail about that in a bit. So mobile design mainly focuses around screen size, touchscreen compatibility, and performance. So I'll go into screen size, or you can see like the details here. So you can see the dimensions of mobile versus desktop screen size. Input method is for mobile is touchscreen, but for desktop it's a mouse or a trackpad. And then overall performance for mobile is pretty slow, like relatively slow compared to a computer, while like a computer is way faster than a phone. Although nowadays phones are pretty fast. So yeah. So first of all, screen size, again, is super small on a phone. So you really want to focus on the content itself and tuck away everything else. If you have like extra like decorations here and there that you like had on your or desktop view, you probably don't have the capacity or the space to put that on a mobile view. And due to the restricted space, your interface should have a stack structure, like a vertical column structure. Like again, when I say like when I have a row on a laptop, I might not be able to have a row on my phone, so I would have to stack that in a column format. So we really want to maximize our width in this case of our phone, just because our width is so limited on a phone that we need to use all of it. And like we say on desktop, we don't want to use 100% width just because our eyes are like scanning left to right and there's too much work for us. But it's the opposite for the phone because we just don't have enough space. We want to use all of our width, or as much width as possible, just so we can emphasize on a lot of different content. So one example, or one bad example that we talk about every semester is Daily Cal and their mobile website. And it's really, really restricted. Like imagine you have an iPhone like 5, like this is like the really tiny square iPhone, right? And you're accessing Daily Cal. But here they use so many fixed positioning elements, like their menu, their top nav bar is fixed. And then they also have this huge ass like ad at the bottom that's fixed. So like you're already limited to this little tiny screen. Like your whole phone screen is already tiny, and now you're getting like 2/3 of that to use. So this is like really bad because like we just can't read a lot of stuff. We already can't read a lot of stuff, and now they're already limiting it even more. So you want to reduce the amount of stuff that are fixed, but also have enough space so that your content is being focused upon. So again, like don't do what Daily Cal is doing, just because, I mean, like they could probably utilize their ad system in a better way, but I mean, if it works for them, sure. And the importance of how we utilize our phone is very important too. Not just the screen, we also hold our phones in different ways. And the 49 or majority of people hold it in one hand. And that's like predominantly right hand people too. And then there's like some people who hold it like cupped, like from the back, 2 hands, and then someone who like with 2 thumbs in the front. So it's really important to know how to design for certain like hand, like holding positions for your phone, because reachability is super important. As you can tell, like phones are getting bigger these days. There's no way I'm going to reach the top of my screen without having to adjust my the way I hold my phone. And so we have like this graphic here that shows you like how easy it is to reach a certain part of the phone. Like you have this good zone where it's like your thumb, like that radius is just perfect for you to tap. There's the medium zone where you kind of have to reach a little bit, but I mean, it's not that bad. And then like the purple zone is just, you just can't, there's no way you're going to touch that without having to adjust your like holding structure. And so another thing about like touchscreen is that thumbs are way less precise than cursors. Cursors are like this tiny little thing on your screen, but your thumb is like fat, you know, like that's why we have this common saying of fat fingering, right? There's like, we can often make mistakes on clicking certain things, and the most commonly used things to click on a phone are buttons. And so we need to really design our experience so that like we don't have our users make that big of a mistake, but also have good reachability at the same time. So one example of our buttons, don't make your buttons so tiny that you just can't possibly click on it, just because again, our fingers are so fat compared to a cursor that it's just not good in that situation. Make it so that it's probably bigger than your like your thumb or something, so that there's little room for error for users. So in this example, like you can tell, like I'm probably gonna have trouble clicking on cancel if I didn't want to save something. So that's really important to think about when we're like touchscreen versus cursors for computers. And one really, really good example of this is how Lyft designed their app. You can see, if you've ever used Lyft, all their action items are at the bottom half of the screen. You will never have to touch something at the top half, if you've ever noticed, because this is their take on reachability. Like you should be able to call a driver at the tip of your fingers, and they took the phrase tip of your fingers literally, because like there's really no need to reach anywhere that is like within the medium to out of reach range on their app. So that's why we just don't really struggle that much when using their application. This is something we often overlook, but this is like overall really great design and use of accessibility and reachability design. Another really good design that Apple took when they designed like iOS 7 or 8 or something like that is their iOS reachability solution of when like you double tap on your home button, or like for newer phones that doesn't have the home button, like you swipe a little down, it'll move all the content down like majority of the screen so that you can be able to reach whatever was at the top of the screen, but now it's like halfway through. So this is, again, another take of how you can utilize reachability. This is like Apple's way of trying it out. So for their like design, they like used 477 pixels of like just nothing to move everything down so that I can reach, if I want to change like the URL of Safari, then I could just do so by just like moving things down halfway through and not really having to adjust my phone hold positioning. So yeah. And then lastly, performance. Again, performance is roughly half of that of a desktop now for phones, so which means that websites are going to load a little slower or much slower than computers. So what this means is that we have to minimize like a lot of JavaScript and front end manipulation. Like you probably don't know what this means, but once we get into the JavaScript section, you'll understand why JavaScript might be a little too hefty for like these kinds of devices versus a computer. And then we want to minimize the use of transitions, animations, hover effects. Like there's really no need for a hover effect. Like how does a phone know you're hovering over something with your finger? Like it's not going to work. It doesn't work like that. So you can't even use hover effects on phones. And mobile UIs should be as simple as click and scroll. That's it. That's the whole goal of mobile UIs. Again, if you have any decorations on your desktop version and you're trying to make it into mobile, you probably will not have room to add that stuff. So the solution is really to design your mobile designs first. And trust me, I've learned this the hard way. I've done it the opposite. And it's super, super hard to do from desktop down to mobile. Why? Because it's so much harder to squash things down and fit all your content on a smaller space, rather than like you're designing for mobile first, where like you're already limited to like this small screen, and then you can expand to however much you want. It's so much easier to do from small to big than big to small. Because for mobile design, it really forces you to think about what is important. So this is like visual hierarchy that we taught you like a couple of weeks ago. And then it takes accessibility to the next level. So you're already thinking about a lot of user experience and user interfaces when just designing mobile first, versus like the computer. You probably won't be thinking about a lot of that, just because you might think like, oh, it's fine. Like most people use the computer anyways, but that is actually not true. So again, mobile design first is the way that I think this is just like industry standard. They always try to make the app design before and then expand it into like the web version. So overall, as review, designing for variation is very important. Like I said, there's just so many screens out there. It's pretty impossible to design for every single screen, but to get it like majority, like cover mostly every screen resolution, it's like pretty good. And make sure your website works on all browsers. Again, different browsers have different takes of rendering. And make sure your websites work well on all devices, whether your phone you use it on a phone, and whether your phone is in portrait mode versus landscape mode. That's also a big difference. And again, mobile first design is very heavily emphasized upon. So yeah, that's basically the end of responsive design. Does anyone have any questions about that? Do we have to make our midterm projects work on all browsers? No, because it'll just be rendered on our portal. You're not putting it up in public. But on the final project is when you'll actually upload it to a real live URL. And that's when we'll, like, the only responsiveness we'll require is that you will need to make it like suitable for all browsers, or most browsers, at least like Chrome and Safari and like Firefox or something. But other than that, like you don't need to make it so that like if I minimize my screen or like change the dimensions, it has to do the same. Like that's fine. But don't worry about it for at least for the midterm project. Yeah. Do we have any other questions? Cool. If we don't have any more questions, we'll take a little short break, and then Julia will take over for CSS Media Queries.
So how we just covered kind of the basic overview of how responsive design works in the real world. And now we're going to go into more detail about how you can actually implement the responsive layouts in your own website. But before that, I want to go over some overview of different strategies that people use to implement these responsive layouts. So if you guys have the slides open right now, you can feel free to click on this link and go to the example that we're going to talk about for the next few slides. But basically, we have this screenshot of a website that we've seen before through previous lectures, where we have these columns of paragraphs or sections that are on the page, and then we want to order it in a way that it's the most intuitive to a user. So in the case that you want to resize your window browser to a smaller size, for example, you can use, one strategy is to use percents. So you can use percents as your unit so that the size of the container, which is the white box you see here, is proportional to your entire screen size. And as you can see here, this screenshot on the right side is what happens when you apply with 50% to the container div. And so when you resize your window, it always makes sure that the white box is 50% of your entire window size. And you might be already wondering, this can be pretty problematic. If your window size is really small, that means your white box will be also really small. So this strategy only works to an extent, and it's definitely not workable for all different screen sizes. And then the next strategy is to use max width. So instead of hard coding the width to be 50%, no matter what screen size you have, you can also use max width to specify the maximum width that an element can be. So for example, here you see that when you apply max width of 500 pixels onto the container div, the white box can only occupy a maximum width of 500 pixels. So if your screen size is really, really big, it will still only occupy 500 pixels. And then if the screen size is small, then it will occupy 500 pixels again. It won't resize, or it won't be bigger than that. So this is very, I guess, easy if you have a screen that is not very big and you don't expect your content to take up a lot of space on your browser window. But when you do have a lot of info and content, max width is also not sufficient for those use cases. So the problem here is that, for example, if you say that the width is 50% and then you resize your window down, it shows up as what you see on the left side, where the restaurants and the coffee shops columns are different widths, and it's also very squished for the coffee shops column. So instead, what we want to do is to wrap the coffee shops section to the next line. So we want to make sure that when you're viewing it on a mobile phone or a mobile browser, you can see all the text in a very intuitive way instead of having all of it cluttered on one line. So the solution for this is to use Flux Wrap. So depending on the width of the items in a Flux box, they will wrap to the next line instead of getting squished together. And this is really useful, especially when you have a row of items, such as what we have here. So if you apply Flux Wrap to the row div, so instead of the container div, you're now applying the Flux Wrap style to the row div. That will basically tell the row that all of the items within it will basically abide abide to a Flexbox container layout. So on the right side, you can see that instead of the columns being all on one row, it's actually divided onto different rows, and that's a lot more clear and easy to read. And the last but not least strategy is to use media queries, which is what I'm going to talk about later on. So this is probably the best catch-all solution to write CSS for all different types of screen sizes. So you don't have to I guess, hard code the width or max width of any containers. You don't have to do Flux Wrap for every single row that you have. You can use media queries to basically kind of specify the sizes and the styles you want for different types of screen sizes. And essentially, you're defining breakpoints to specify the screen width so that they use different CSS styles. And this can range from all different types of screen sizes between like phones, tablets, and laptops. And here on the slide, we also show some like common pixel screen sizes for different like devices. So smaller smartphones are usually up to like 480 pixels. And then tablets and larger smartphones range from 480 to about 770 pixels. And then the bigger device you get, the more pixels you have in terms of the maximum width and height that you are afforded for your website. So now let's go into media queries specifically. We can design how the document is presented across different media. So for example, on the left side, you can see that this is what Dropbox's website looks like on the left side. And then the smaller window is what it looks like on your mobile phone. And so we can essentially do this for like any kind of website that you make. Before I go into detail about the specific code that is involved with coding these responsive layouts, let's first think about like in terms of what these medias are. Like, is it extra to talk about medias for a web page? And since it's just a website or a web page for screens, like, is it necessary for us to like specify so many things, or is it really like only just a website for screens? So it turns out that there's a lot of other types of media out there. So you do have like screens for computer screens and like phone devices, but you also have print, which is for printed documents. And if you're viewing like a PDF or some kind of like document within the browser that is in print preview mode, you can also specify different styles for that as well. And then we also have speech for speech synthesizers. And there's a lot more other media types out there, such as I think I saw one that was like Braille. So you can also like make different styles for like Braille devices, which I thought was really cool. But for the purpose of this class, you'll mainly be dealing with the screen media type. Okay, so now we'll go into the HTML requirement for you to code responsive layouts. So in your HTML head tag, you have to include this tag in order for your CSS media queries to work. Basically, this line, which says meta name, viewport, content width equals device width, and initial scale equals 1, it specifies that you want all your content on your web page to be, I guess, they should adapt to your browser window size. So that's basically specifying that everything in your website will be according to the viewport. And when you do initial scale equals 1, that means that the zoom is 1. So for example, if you're on like a screen size that is like 360 pixels wide, but your website is originally like on a 960 pixel wide screen, it won't, when you do like initial scale equals 1, it won't show like the 960 pixel version on your 360 pixel phone. It'll show the 360 pixel version. So basically it tells the browser that the zoom is 1 so that it doesn't like zoom like super out if you're viewing like a larger like website content on like a smaller screen size. So in terms of CSS media queries, obviously it's placed in your CSS files, and this is where you'll specify like the max width of the screen size that you're applying the style to, as well as the style itself. So notice that there's a special kind of syntax that's used here, and it's very similar to keyframe animations, which we haven't actually covered yet, but we will cover it in the next week's lecture. So this is a bit different from the CSS syntax that we're used to in terms of it's not just like the selector and then curly braces and then the style inside. The style as a whole is inside another like, I guess, bracket that kind of dictates like this special special directive basically. So at media is a special directive in CSS that matches the media queries. And this is the general syntax for that. So in the case that you want to apply this CSS media query to multiple screen sizes, this is an example of what it would look like. So you have at media max width 600 pixels, and then you want to set the font size to 14 pixels, which is, I copied this over from the previous slide. But then you also want to specify that for screens that are a max width of 375 pixels, you want the background to be also red. So yeah, this is basically saying that if your screen size is 600 pixels, the font size will be 14 pixels. But if the screen size is 375 pixels, then the font size will be 14 pixels and the background will be red. So this is how you specify styles for like multiple screen sizes at once. Say you want to match all the computer screens that are no larger than 600 pixels, you can do that by using the keyword and in between the media type and the max width that's specified. So if you want to apply the same exact styles to multiple screen widths, you can do screen and min width 200 pixels and max width 400 pixels. So that will get all the screens that are between 200 and 400 pixels in width. And as you can see, you just use the keyword and to place in between the different widths that you want to apply to. Yeah, and now we will do a short demo. Oh wait, that is not the right one. Okay, so we have this code pin here, and if you guys want to like follow along, do it on your own too, you can open the link on the slide. But basically, we have a nav desktop container here, which is, you can see that there's like 3 links at the top for home, about, and contact. And then we have nav mobile, which is, it's kind of non-intuitive, but it's basically this like little white circle here. Obviously, it looks very out of place and that does not belong there. So that's what we're going to fix. So the instructions tell us to make the user see the nav mobile on only the mobile resolution. So anything that's under 700 pixels wide, you will see this like white circle with the blue border. But if it's larger than 700 pixels, then you should only see the nav desktop version, which is the nav links that you see here at the top. So kind of just scrolling through the CSS, we noticed that we don't really have any media queries yet. If don't scroll too far, because then you'll see the solution, but yeah, we don't have any media queries applied yet. So we're gonna do that. So if you guys recall, the syntax for specifying the media directive in CSS, it starts with @media. And then inside of that, you want to specify the max width that you want to apply the styles to for the specific screen size. So we were told that anything under 700 pixels wide should only be nav mobile. So here we can specify max width is 700 pixels. And then we put curly braces to indicate that this is an entire directive. And then within the directive, we want to apply specific styles. Here, it's pretty simple because we just want to view nav mobile instead of nav desktop. So we can do and then we want to make nav desktop disappear. So we want to add display none to the desktop. So basically this piece of code is saying that for any screens that are equal or less than 700 pixels wide in terms of the screen size, we will have these styles applied. So nav mobile right here will show, and then nav desktop will basically hide itself. Now, as you can see, nothing really has changed because we didn't really apply the style for when the media screen width is larger than 700 pixels. So we also need to specify that. Let me double check that my syntax is correct. Yes, okay. So I guess in terms of specifying that if the width is larger than 700 pixels and you want the nav mobile to hide, but the nav desktop to show, one, I guess, easy way to do that, I think, would just be applying a style like generally without the media directive. So let me try that first. Yeah, so I just applied display none to the nav mobile like container. And so as you can see, the white circle disappeared. And then if we want to try resizing the window to see if this worked, we can basically just drag this window. And then as you can see, the original nav desktop view has disappeared. So all these nav links are gone when I resize it to a smaller size. And then only the nav mobile shows up. So this is how responsive layouts basically work. You specify like this media query, and then whenever the screen size becomes less than or equal to 700 pixels, then you apply these styles. Otherwise, whatever is in here is the default style. Are there any other questions? If not, that's basically the end of this programming lecture. There's just like one last slide about like using the inspector element, which I think Howie already showed in the previous lecture. So yeah, this is just like a review of how that works.